The sun had barely begun to rise over the Pacific when Lena Marshall pulled up to the Navy SEAL training compound in Coronado, California. The air smelled of salt, wet sand, and the faint tongue of diesel from nearby boats. She had been driving for hours, lost in thought, rehearsing the words she would never say out loud. I am here. I will not quit. Her duffel bag, heavy with nothing but essentials and her determination, thumped against the floor as she stepped out of the rental car. The wind tugged at her hair, tossing strands across her face, but she didn't bother brushing them aside. She had learned long ago that distractions were the enemy of focus. The compound looked exactly like she imagined it would, imposing, almost militaristic in its austerity. Long rows of cinder block barracks lined the gravel paths, and in the distance, recruits ran through endless drills, their shouts carrying over the waves. The place was alive with noise, sweat, and fear. Lena didn't flinch. She walked toward the main building, her boots crunching against the gravel, each step echoing a quiet determination that seemed almost foreign in the chaos around her. As she approached the training yard, the murmurs began. A group of male recruits huddled near the obstacle course, leaning against the metal bars and snickering. "Check it out," one muttered. "Looks like we got a little girl joining us." Another laughed, nudging his friend. "She'd be gone by lunch. Bet $5. Lena caught a glimpse of their faces, wide eyes, teeth bared in what they thought was intimidation, but she didn't acknowledge them. She had no time for their doubts or laughter. Their judgment meant nothing. The instructors, seasoned SEAL veterans with eyes like hawks, watched her approach. One raised an eyebrow. She knew the type. Men who had seen the worst humanity had to offer and emerged unbroken. And now, here she was, a woman among them, entering a world where weakness was a liability and mistakes could be fatal. She felt the weight of their scrutiny, but didn't flinch. She didn't have to. Lena had spent her entire adult life training for situations just like this. Long nights running in the Oregon rain, carrying wounded patients from accident scenes, learning to make split-second decisions when seconds meant life or death. This was different, but not impossible. Inside the main building, she registered her arrival quietly, keeping her head down. The other recruits, mostly young men in their early 20s, looked at her with curiosity, suspicion, and in some cases, outright disdain. A few muttered comments, low enough for her not to hear clearly, but loud enough for the instructors to notice. She ignored it all, setting her duffel bag down and straightening her back. She wasn't here to make friends. She was here to survive. To earn respect the only way that counted, through action. Her first interaction came almost immediately. An instructor, a tall man with a face lined by years in combat, walked toward her. "Marshall," he said, his voice flat but carrying weight. "You know what you signed up for?" Lena nodded once. "I do, sir." He studied her for a moment, his eyes narrowing, almost as if testing whether her confidence was genuine or a fragile facade. Then he turned and left, leaving her to stand alone in the room with the other recruits. It was during the first drill that Lena felt the subtle hostility in the air. The recruits were paired up for a strength and endurance exercise. Her partner, a broad-shouldered man named Travis Bulldog Kane, smirked as he looked her over. "Hope you're not planning on slowing me down," he said. The smirk was meant to intimidate. Lena simply nodded, tying her laces tighter. She had been underestimated before, often, and every time it fueled her fire. She knew that Kane and the others would learn soon enough. She didn't quit. She didn't complain, and she didn't give anyone the satisfaction of doubting her. The drill began, and Lena's body moved instinctively. She ran, lifted, and carried with precision, each movement deliberate. Her lungs burned, her muscles screamed, but she kept her focus. For every whispered insult, Every mocking glance, she added a silent vow to herself. You'll see. You'll regret doubting me. The men around her began to notice. Some exchanged uneasy glances. Others scoffed, trying to dismiss her as a fluke. But Lena's movements were fluid, calculated, the work of someone who had trained not just her body, but her mind. After the drill, the recruits collapsed onto the sand, exhausted. Kane glanced at her and sneered. Not bad for a girl. Lena didn't respond. Words were meaningless here. Respect had to be earned, and she would let her actions speak for her. Later, while the others rested, she found a quiet corner and did push-ups until her arms shook, running laps around the compound until her legs were heavy as lead. This wasn't about proving herself to anyone else. It was about honoring a promise made years ago, a promise to someone she had lost. Lena's mind drifted briefly to her brother, a Navy SEAL who had died in an ambush overseas. He had been fearless, disciplined, and relentless, the kind of man who demanded nothing less from himself than excellence. Before his death, he had turned to her and said, "Don't let fear own you." Those words had become her mantra, her guiding principle. Every step she took on that compound was a tribute to him, a declaration that she would not be broken, no matter how cruel the world tried to be. By the end of her first day, Lena had not spoken much, had not argued, had not sought approval. Yet, quietly, she had made an impression. The instructors noticed her endurance, her calm under pressure, and her refusal to give in to exhaustion. The recruits, who had laughed at her arrival, began to see a different truth emerging. This woman was not just surviving. She was observing, learning, and calculating. She was a storm waiting to arrive, and no one yet knew the strength behind her quiet demeanor. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows across the training yard, Lena stood alone at the edge of the surf. The waves crashed against her boots, cold water lapping at the sand. She inhaled deeply, tasting salt and resolve. Tomorrow would bring more challenges, longer runs, heavier loads, and undoubtedly ridicule. But Lena Marshall was ready. She didn't just want to survive SEAL training. She intended to dominate it, to redefine the expectations of everyone who had doubted her. In that moment, standing at the boundary of land and sea, Lena made a silent vow to herself. I will not fail. I will not quit. I will be the last one standing, and when they finally see me, it will be too late to stop what I am. The horizon burned orange, and for the first time since she arrived, Lena smiled. Not a smile of triumph, but of quiet certainty. The journey had begun, and she was already ahead of the pack. The first rays of dawn barely pierced the fog rolling in from the Pacific when Lena Marshall's eyes snapped open. Her body ached in ways she hadn't known possible, muscles tight and lungs burning from yesterday's drills. She forced herself to her feet, ignoring the stiffness and soreness, and slipped into her wet training uniform. Today was just the beginning, the start of a week that would test her endurance, her willpower, and her spirit. Lena didn't flinch. She never flinched. The training yard was alive with chaos as she arrived. Male recruits were running sprints in staggered lines, dragging weighted sleds behind them. Instructors barked commands that cut through the morning air like gunfire. Lena moved into position, her focus absolute. The whispers started again. She's still here? I thought she'd quit by now, muttered a recruit behind her. A snicker followed. Lena didn't turn. She didn't need to. Every insult, every doubt thrown at her was fuel. She had learned early in life that the quietest people often carried the heaviest storms inside them. The first drill was the log carry, teams of 4 dragging a massive wooden log through knee-deep surf, then across sand, over obstacles, and finally up a hill. Lena's partner for the exercise was Travis Bulldog Kine, the same man who had mocked her the previous day. He glanced at her with a smirk. "Ready to slow me down again?" he said, shoving the log toward her. Lena gripped it firmly, her knuckles white. She met his gaze without flinching. "I carry my weight," she said quietly, voice calm, controlled. The log was heavier than she imagined. Each step was a battle. The surf tried to pull her down, the sand sucked at her boots, and her shoulders burned like they were on fire. Kane grunted beside her, clearly struggling, while the other two men in their team cursed with every step. "Come on, lighten up," one yelled. Lena ignored it. Her mind wasn't on them. It was on finishing, on proving to herself that she could endure more than anyone thought possible. By the halfway point, Kane's smirk had vanished. His arms shook, sweat streaming down his face. He muttered something under his breath, but Lena didn't hear it. She was lost in the rhythm of the task. Her muscles screamed, her lungs begged for air, but she kept moving. Step, pull, step, pull. Every motion precise, deliberate, unwavering. Other recruits began to notice. Even some instructors paused, eyebrows raised at her tenacity. Lena was not a distraction, not a weakness. She was a force quietly emerging. After the log was finally dropped at the designated zone, the team collapsed onto the sand, gasping. Kane rolled over, staring at Lena with disbelief. "You did okay," he muttered begrudgingly, his voice tinged with surprise. Lena simply nodded, wiping sand and sweat from her face. She didn't speak. Words had no power here. Actions spoke louder than mocking comments, louder than laughter, louder than doubt. And she had already said enough. The next series of exercises tested endurance and mental toughness. Recruits were forced to crawl under barbed wire, leap over obstacles, and carry heavy packs while being shouted at by instructors. Lena moved through it all like a shadow, never faltering. Several recruits stumbled, their bodies giving out, and instructors screamed commands in frustration. Kane cursed repeatedly, clearly exhausted and frustrated, while Lena's silent determination became a point of quiet tension around her. She was no longer just the girl who showed up, she was a presence. By mid-morning, the sun had risen fully, and the training yard had turned into a furnace. Sweat stung Lena's eyes, and every muscle in her body ached with fatigue, but she pressed on. During a short break, she noticed some of the men watching her from the sidelines. Their faces were a mix of curiosity, envy, and unease. She didn't meet their gaze. She didn't need to. Lena had learned long ago that letting others see your struggles was giving them control over you. Control was something she would never surrender. The mental games began next. Instructors shouted insults and challenges, designed to provoke emotional reactions. Lena had faced worse in life. Hostile patients screaming in emergency rooms, terrified civilians clinging to her for help, moments when panic threatened to take over. Yet here, in the searing sun and under the unrelenting scrutiny of men trained to detect weakness, she remained composed. Kane tried to taunt her again, making crude jokes about her size, her endurance, even her gender. Lena ignored him. But every fiber of her being was ready for the day she would answer, not with words, but with proof. The final drill of the day was the surf exercise, a brutal test of strength and fear management. Recruits were thrown into the icy waves with weighted packs and required to swim to a buoy several hundred meters offshore. Lena stepped into the water without hesitation. The cold struck her like a jolt, but she pushed forward, muscles working in perfect coordination. Around her, men were flailing, coughing, some even panicking. Kane struggled beside her, water filling his mouth and eyes. But Lena swam steadily, unrelenting, until she reached the buoy and hauled herself onto the sand with smooth precision. By the time the day ended, Lena's body was battered, every joint screaming in protest, but her mind remained sharp. She had endured insults, challenges, physical exhaustion, and ridicule, yet she stood upright, calm, and unbroken. Around her, the other recruits began to see a different reality. This woman was not weak, not fragile, not someone to be dismissed. She was a force, quietly asserting herself with every movement, every calculated step, every controlled breath. That night, while the others slept in the barracks, Lena found a quiet corner of the compound. She dropped her duffel bag, stretched her aching muscles, and began her private training. Push-ups until her arms trembled violently, sprints around the yard in the darkness, and calisthenics that tested endurance beyond normal human limits. Her body ached, her mind screamed for rest, yet she continued. Each drop of sweat, each strain of muscle was a declaration. She would not fail. She would not quit. She would endure. Lena's mind drifted briefly to her brother, a Navy SEAL who had died in combat. His memory burned brightly in her chest, a guiding light and an anchor. Before his death, he had looked at her and said simply, "Don't let fear own you." Those words had become her compass. Every time her body ached, every time Kane or another recruit taunted her, every time doubt whispered in the corners of her mind, she repeated them silently. "Don't let fear own you. Don't let fear own you." And she never had. By the end of her first full day of training, Lena was physically exhausted and mentally drained, yet there was a quiet triumph in her eyes. She had survived the men's ridicule, the instructors' unyielding tests, and the unrelenting challenges of the drills. She had proven, if only to herself, that she belonged here. Tomorrow would bring new trials, more intense, more punishing, but Lena felt ready. She was not merely surviving. She was beginning to define what it meant to endure in a place designed to break people. As she lay on her cot, staring at the ceiling, Lena made a silent vow. The men who laughed at her, the instructors who doubted her, the waves that sought to overwhelm her, all would see her strength in time. She was not here to participate. She was here to dominate. And when they realized it, it would already be too late. The sun had barely risen when the recruits assembled on the beach for the next grueling drill. The fog still hung low over the ocean, and the salty air stung the eyes and throat. Lena Marshall stood silently among them, her duffel slung over her shoulder, muscles still sore from the previous day. She was no longer a curiosity, no longer the girl who showed up. She had become a presence, quiet, focused, and increasingly impossible to ignore. Travis Bulldog Kane, the loudest of her detractors, was already in position, arms crossed, a smirk plastered across his face. "Hope you're ready for today," he said, his voice dripping with condescension. Lena didn't respond. Words were meaningless here. Action was everything. She simply adjusted her pack and surveyed the obstacle course ahead. The drill involved carrying weighted logs through waist-deep surf, scaling high walls, and sprinting across uneven terrain, a test of endurance, strategy, and mental fortitude. The first challenge began quickly. Lena's team took the logs, moving through the surf as the cold water lashed against their bodies. Kane grunted beside her, trying to assert dominance, shoving her arm slightly to throw her off balance. "Watch yourself, little girl," he sneered. Lena steadied herself, gritting her teeth. She didn't flinch. She didn't stumble. Every movement was controlled, precise, and deliberate. The men around her were beginning to sense it. She wasn't weak, she wasn't fragile, and she wasn't intimidated. By the halfway mark of the drill, Kane's patience had worn thin. The weight of the log, the fatigue, and his own bruised ego boiled over. He shoved Lena harder this time, and when she didn't yield, he did something no one expected. He slapped her across the face. The sound was sharp, echoing over the roar of the surf. Lena froze for a fraction of a second, but then her gaze locked on his. Calm, steady, unflinching. The fire in her eyes was unmistakable. The other recruits went silent. The instructors paused, observing carefully. Kane smirked, expecting her to react with anger, humiliation, or tears. He got none of that. Lena's lips pressed into a thin line. Her head tilted slightly, a small movement, almost imperceptible, but full of warning. "You'll regret that," she said softly, her voice low but carrying weight. Kane blinked, confused, his arrogance faltering. No one had ever spoken to him like that. The drill ended, but the tension lingered. Lena didn't argue with anyone afterward. She didn't seek confrontation. Instead, she focused on recovery, stretching her aching muscles and hydrating. But in her mind, the incident was not forgotten. She knew a moment would come when she would have the chance to prove that strength was not about size or volume or brute force. It was about precision, strategy, and control. That moment arrived sooner than anyone expected. Later that evening, hand-to-hand combat training commenced. The room was dimly lit, the smell of sweat and sand thick in the air. Recruits paired off to spar under the watchful eyes of the instructors. Kane, still simmering from the earlier slap, flexed his muscles and stepped toward Lena, expecting an easy victory. The other men snickered, whispering bets and predictions. Lena adjusted her stance, her weight balanced, eyes locked on his. She didn't need intimidation. She had control, and she knew it. The first exchange was chaotic. Kane lunged, swinging wildly, his movements fueled by anger rather than technique. Lena ducked and stepped aside, letting his momentum carry him forward. Then, with precise timing, she grabbed his arm, pivoted, and flipped him onto the mat. Kane hit the ground hard, the air leaving his lungs in a sharp gasp. The room went silent. The instructors stared, some incredulous, some impressed. The men who had laughed and mocked just minutes earlier watched in disbelief. Lena didn't pause. She held Kane pinned with controlled strength, her arm across his chest, her legs positioned for maximum leverage. Her breathing was steady, calm, measured. Kane struggled, but Lena's hold was flawless. "Enough," she said quietly, releasing him. She stood, wiped the sweat from her brow, and saluted the instructor, a gesture that demanded recognition without a word. Kane scrambled to his feet, red-faced, humiliated. For the first time, the arrogance that had defined him in training faltered. The effect of the confrontation rippled through the training yard. Whispers replaced laughter. Stares replaced smirks. The recruits, who had once doubted her abilities, now watched Lena with a mixture of respect and unease. The instructors nodded subtly, their expressions betraying the approval they rarely gave freely. Lena didn't smile. There was no celebration here, no ego. She had proven a point, yes, but it was not about revenge. It was about showing that control, precision, and mental resilience were worth more than brute strength or arrogance. Kane avoided her gaze for the rest of the evening, his usual swagger replaced by cautious awareness. He had learned something vital. Respect could not be demanded, only earned. And Lena had earned it in seconds. The other recruits, once vocal critics, now observed her silently, aware that any challenge to her would no longer be met with mockery, but with calculation and skill. That night, Lena returned to her cot, muscles screaming in protest, bruises forming where the drills had tested her limits. She didn't seek comfort in sleep or food. Instead, she took a moment to reflect on the day, on the slap, on the fight, and on the silent victory she had achieved. Each pain, each insult, each moment of doubt was a stepping stone toward something far greater. She wasn't just surviving. She was laying the groundwork for domination, for the moment when no one would dare question her presence again. Lena's mind drifted to her brother once more, the seal she had lost years earlier. His death had left a hole in her life, but it had also instilled in her a relentless drive. He had been fearless, disciplined, and exacting, traits she now embodied. "Don't let fear own you," his words whispered in her memory. Lena clenched her fists, feeling the weight of that promise push her forward. Fear would never control her. Arrogance would never intimidate her. And no one would ever slap her without consequence again. By the time she finally lay down, exhaustion finally catching her, Lena felt a quiet triumph. She had faced hostility, endured humiliation, and emerged not only unbroken, but stronger, more focused, and increasingly respected. The other recruits would think twice before challenging her again, and Kane, in particular, would learn a lesson he would not forget. But Lena's victory was silent. There was no boasting, no celebration. She had only taken the first step in a journey that would test every limit of her body and mind, and she knew the hardest trials were still ahead. Outside, the Pacific waves crashed against the shore, the rhythmic roar echoing her own heartbeat. Lena closed her eyes and breathed deeply, the salt air filling her lungs. She was beginning to understand that this training was more than physical endurance. It was a crucible designed to forge character, to reveal who could endure under pressure, and to teach lessons about control, patience, and resilience. And she, quiet and determined, was mastering all of them. As the night deepened and the camp fell into uneasy silence, Lena whispered a vow to herself, a promise that no slap, no insult, and no challenge would ever break her. She would finish what she started. She would endure what others could not. And when the time came, those who doubted her would finally see the storm behind the quiet eyes. For now, she rested, muscles trembling and body weary, but spirit unbroken, ready for the trials that tomorrow would surely bring. The next morning, the training yard was bathed in a pale gray light, the kind of light that seemed to strip the world down to its raw essentials. The air was heavy with salt, sweat, and anticipation. Lena Marshall stepped onto the sand, her movements deliberate, her gaze steady. Word of yesterday's confrontation had spread quickly. Whispers floated among the recruits, and for the first time, some eyes followed her not with mockery, but with genuine curiosity, and perhaps a touch of fear. Travis Bulldog Kane, still nursing his bruised ego from the hand-to-hand spar, avoided eye contact as he stretched near the obstacle course. His usual arrogance was gone, replaced with an almost palpable tension. He knew, deep down, that the dynamic had shifted. Lena had proven that physical size and loudness meant nothing when faced with precision, control, and unwavering focus. Every recruit present had seen it, a clear demonstration that respect was not given. It was earned in action. The first drill of the day was the pit combat exercise, a grueling hand-to-hand scenario designed to mimic close-quarters battle. The room was dimly lit, sand covering the floor, the instructors shouting commands that pierced through the tension like gunfire. Recruits were paired off, but the air hummed with unspoken anticipation. Everyone knew who the star had become. Kane, grim-faced, was paired with Lena. A crowd of recruits and instructors formed a circle, their eyes hungry for a repeat of the previous day's spectacle. Lena's stance was calm, grounded. Kane lunged first, driven by anger and desperation rather than strategy. His swing was wild, predictable. Lena didn't flinch. She sidestepped, using the momentum he provided, and swept his legs with the precision of someone who had practiced this exact move 1,000 times. Kane's body slammed into the sand, the air leaving his lungs with a strangled gasp. A hush fell over the circle. No one moved. No one spoke. The instructors watched, impressed but silently calculating. Lena maintained control, pinning Kane with a firm, precise grip that left him struggling but completely unable to escape. "Enough," she said quietly, calm and authoritative. She released him, standing tall, her eyes scanning the circle of onlookers. There was no triumph in her expression, no gloating, only quiet mastery. Kane scrambled to his feet, red-faced and humiliated. The lesson was clear. Strength without control was meaningless. In that moment, Lena became more than a recruit. She became a standard, a living demonstration of discipline, skill, and mental acuity. The ripple effect was immediate. The men who had mocked her the day before now approached her with caution. Some whispered in low tones, others simply watched from a distance, unsure how to approach. Kane avoided direct eye contact for the rest of the day, his arrogance replaced with reluctant respect. For the first time, Lena's quiet confidence commanded attention, a subtle but undeniable authority. She did not bask in it. She had no need. Her actions had already spoken louder than any words could. The drills continued, each one testing endurance, mental focus, and combat skills. Lena moved through them like a ghost, steady and unshakable. Even when paired with physically stronger men, she maintained control, guiding movements with precision, anticipating attacks, and responding with calculated efficiency. The instructors noted her progress, nodding quietly to each other as they observed her tactical awareness. It was rare to see a recruit not only survive, but dominate under such pressure, and even rarer to see one command respect without a single raised voice. By midday, the sun was high, beating down on the recruits with relentless intensity. Fatigue began to set in, but Lena's focus never wavered. She carried her log with perfect rhythm during the obstacle course, her movements efficient, conserving energy while maintaining maximum speed. Kane struggled beside her, his frustration mounting, yet Lena remained unshaken. Her calm determination was a silent message. No amount of anger, no attempt at intimidation could shake her focus. The men around her began to mirror her discipline, unconsciously adjusting their pace and strategy to match hers. After the final drill, the recruits collapsed onto the sand, exhausted, sweating, and breathing heavily. Kane sat apart, silent, his usual bravado extinguished. Lena, despite her own fatigue, approached him quietly. "You need to control your anger," she said softly, her voice low but firm. "Strength isn't about how hard you hit. It's about knowing when to strike." Kane looked up at her, a mixture of humility and disbelief in his eyes. For the first time, he saw her not as a woman to be mocked, but as a peer, a warrior who had earned her place. The instructors, observing the interaction, nodded subtly. Lena's lesson had extended beyond physical combat. It had shifted the culture of the yard. The other recruits, who had once laughed at her, now watched carefully, reconsidering their assumptions. They had witnessed skill, strategy, and courage in action, and they had seen firsthand that underestimating Lena Marshall would be a costly mistake. The balance of power had shifted, silently but irrevocably, and everyone felt it. That evening, Lena returned to her corner of the barracks, muscles aching, but her spirit alive. She didn't celebrate, didn't boast. She reflected quietly on the day's events, on the slap, on the sparring, and on the transformation she had witnessed in Kane and the others. Respect, she realized, was not a gift. It was the inevitable result of consistency, courage, and unwavering resolve. And she had earned it, silently, without a single shout or show of ego. She lay on her cot, muscles trembling from exhaustion, and allowed herself a moment to breathe. The lesson of the day was clear. Strength was meaningless without control. Discipline was invisible, but it was the most powerful weapon she possessed. She had faced ridicule, physical confrontation, and the doubts of an entire training camp, and emerged not only unbroken but dominant. Outside, the ocean crashed against the shore, the waves echoing the rhythm of her heart. Lena closed her eyes and imagined her brother, the seal she had lost, standing beside her. She could hear his voice in her mind, steady, unwavering. Don't let fear own you. She smiled faintly. Fear did not own her. Anger did not control her. The slap, the humiliation, the mocking, they were now all part of her story, a story that would shape every step she took in the trials to come. As the stars emerged over the darkening sky, Lena whispered another vow, a silent promise to herself and to the memory of her brother. She would continue, no matter the cost. She would endure, no matter the challenge. And when the final day came, when every man and instructor in that compound looked at her, they would see the truth. Lena Marshall was unstoppable, precise, and unyielding. The lesson had been delivered, but the story was only beginning. The first light of dawn barely broke the horizon when Lena Marshall was already standing on the beach, drenched in sweat and salt from the frigid surf. Her body ached, muscles screaming with exhaustion, but she moved with quiet purpose. Today marked the beginning of Hell Week, the infamous crucible of Navy SEAL training designed to strip recruits of every comfort, every ounce of pride, and every shred of doubt. For most, it was a test of survival. For Lena, it was a battlefield where she intended to define herself. The instructors wasted no time. Orders were barked like gunfire. Drills were relentless, and sleep was forbidden. Recruits were thrown into a continuous cycle of running, swimming, obstacle courses, and log carries, all under the watchful eyes of men who had seen fear in every form. Kane, still nursing his bruised ego from previous confrontations, tried to assert himself among the others, but Lena had already become the quiet force around which the day revolved. The other men instinctively followed her pace, whether they admitted it or not. The first exercise was a long-distance surf run. Recruits had to sprint into waist-deep water, battle the waves while carrying weighted packs, and return without faltering. Lena's muscles burned with every step, the cold water biting at her skin, yet she moved with unwavering determination. Every push, every step, was deliberate. The men around her began to falter under the relentless pace, but Lena didn't hesitate. She had long ago learned to convert exhaustion into focus, pain into fuel. She set the pace, slow enough to conserve energy, fast enough to dominate the challenge. By mid-morning, the recruits were barely coherent. Blisters, bruises, and fatigue had taken their toll. Several men collapsed into the sand, gasping for air. Lena noticed one of them struggling to keep his pack upright. Without hesitation, she shifted part of the weight, helping him adjust and continue. She did not announce her actions, did not ask for recognition. Helping others was not about praise. It was about survival, not just her own, but the survival of her team. In that moment, she became more than a recruit. She became a quiet anchor. Kane, despite himself, was beginning to respect her. He kept glancing at Lena as they ran, noticing her form, her focus, and her calm determination under conditions designed to crush any semblance of control. He wanted to speak, to challenge her dominance, but every attempt at confrontation was muted by the harsh reality of Hell Week. Words mattered less than every precise step, every controlled breath, every ounce of energy spent wisely. Lena had transformed the dynamic of the yard without a single shout. The next series of exercises tested endurance and pain tolerance. Recruits were forced to crawl under barbed wire through mud, climb slippery walls, and carry logs across uneven terrain while instructors screamed orders, insults, and challenges. Lena moved through the chaos like a shadow, graceful and unyielding, her focus absolute. She ignored Kane's occasional jabs and insults. Every attempt to provoke her was met with calm precision. Her body shook with exhaustion, but her mind was razor-sharp. At night, sleep was a distant memory. Recruits were huddled together in freezing sand, drenched from the day's drills, yet the instructors demanded they rise again, immediately. Lena obeyed without complaint. Her body was screaming for rest, but she had trained herself to push past pain and fatigue. She focused on rhythm, breathing, pacing, movement. Each motion was deliberate, conserving energy while maintaining efficiency. Even as others staggered and collapsed, Lena continued, seemingly tireless, her willpower burning brighter than exhaustion. By the third day, the physical toll had become apparent. Cuts, blisters, and bruises covered the recruits' bodies. Several dropped out, unable to continue. Lena's hands were raw, her feet swollen, and her muscles threatened to betray her. Yet she pressed on. Every repetition, every lap, every drill was a silent testament to her resolve. She had endured. Far worse in life, the loss of her brother, countless nights saving lives under impossible conditions, and hell. Week was merely another stage on which to demonstrate her mastery over fear and pain. The instructors introduced additional mental challenges, disorientation drills, timed obstacles, and simulated combat exercises designed to break focus. Recruits were pushed to the edge of their physical and psychological limits. Panic and frustration flared among the men. Kane struggled to maintain composure, frustration etched on his face. Lena, however, remained calm, measuring every move, analyzing every obstacle, and anticipating the unpredictable chaos around her. She became a leader in silence, her composure a lesson for the others. At one point, during a team exercise in the surf, a recruit lost his balance and nearly drowned under the weight of exhaustion. Lena didn't hesitate. Without thinking, she grabbed his arm and pulled him to safety, positioning herself between him and the turbulent waves. The other men watched in stunned silence. Kane's expression betrayed a complex mix of awe and guilt. He had mocked her, doubted her, even struck her once. Yet here she was saving lives with calm authority, while he struggled just to maintain his footing. By the fifth day, Hell Week had reached its peak intensity. Recruits were deprived of sleep, food was scarce, and every drill tested the boundaries of human endurance. Some collapsed from sheer exhaustion. Others pushed on despite injuries, driven by stubborn pride. Lena, battered and bruised, pressed forward with the same unwavering determination. She carried teammates who faltered, adjusted movements to conserve energy, and maintained mental focus when others teetered on the brink of panic. Her presence was magnetic, her calm a stabilizing force amid chaos. The instructors noticed. They whispered among themselves, nodding as they observed Lena's quiet authority. She had transformed the dynamic of the training yard. Where there had been doubt, now there was respect. Where there had been mockery, now there was observation. Kane, once arrogant and dismissive, followed her lead without words, gradually understanding the unspoken truth. Lena Marshall was unstoppable, not because she was fearless, but because she had mastered control over her body, her mind, and the chaos around her. At the end of Hell Week, recruits were battered, broken, and exhausted. Many had quit. Some lay sprawled in the sand, barely able to move. Lena, though her body ached and her muscles threatened to give out, stood tall. Her uniform was soaked in sweat and mud, her hands blistered, her skin bruised and cut, yet she radiated calm authority. She had endured what most could not, proven herself beyond doubt, and earned the silent respect of every recruit and instructor present. That night, as Lena lay on her cot, her body trembling from exhaustion, she reflected on the week. Every insult, every slap, every doubt had become fuel. Every failure she had witnessed in others became a lesson for her. She had not just survived Hell Week. She had thrived in it, turning extreme adversity into a testament of endurance, skill, and willpower. She whispered a quiet promise to herself. I will endure, no matter the cost. I will not fail. I will rise when others fall. Outside, The ocean waves crashed relentlessly against the shore, echoing the rhythm of Lena's heartbeat. She closed her eyes, feeling the exhaustion settle into her muscles like a heavy fog. Yet her mind remained clear, focused, and unyielding. Hell Week had tested every limit of her body, but it had only strengthened the steel in her spine and the fire in her soul. Lena Marshall had survived the unthinkable, and she was just getting started. By the time the sun rose on the 6th day of training, the recruits were exhausted beyond recognition. Bodies were battered, muscles screamed in protest, and eyes were heavy with fatigue. Lena Marshall, too, felt the weight of every drill, every sleepless night, every brutal challenge. Yet she moved with quiet precision, steady and unwavering. She had endured more than most, but it wasn't physical endurance that defined her strength. It was the fire behind her eyes, the purpose that drove her forward when others would have crumbled. During a brief lull in the chaos, a recruit approached her cautiously. Curiosity etched on his face. He had watched Lena for days, fascinated by her relentless drive and unmatched composure. "Why do you keep going?" he asked quietly, almost afraid of the answer. "You've already proven yourself more than anyone else here." Lena paused, her gaze drifting toward the horizon, where the gray waves clashed with the sand in endless motion. She didn't answer immediately. She rarely spoke of her reason. Few people had ever truly known. The recruit persisted. "I mean, what keeps you moving when everyone else is collapsing?" Lena inhaled deeply, the salty air filling her lungs. She remembered her brother, the SEAL she had lost years earlier, killed in a firefight overseas. She remembered the day she had received the news, the numbness, the grief, and the hollow ache that had taken residence in her chest. But she also remembered his last words, whispered in a voice that carried more authority than fear itself. "Don't let fear own you." Those words had haunted her, guided her, and fueled her every action since. "My brother," she finally began, her voice quiet but steady. "He was a Navy SEAL, the best I've ever known. He believed in discipline, in courage, and in doing what others couldn't. He died in combat." Her words hung in the air, heavy with grief and resolve. The recruit's eyes widened. Lena's calm had always been a shield, but here, for a brief moment, she allowed her reason to be seen. She wasn't just enduring the pain for herself. She was honoring his memory. "He told me once, before he left on his last deployment," Lena continued, voice firming, "that fear should never control me. That I had to be stronger than it, braver than it, smarter than it. He didn't get the chance to finish what he started. So I am." Her fists tightened unconsciously, nails digging into her palms. Every push-up, every sprint, every drill since she arrived had been a tribute to him. She didn't just want to survive SEAL training. She wanted to embody the promise she had made to him on the day he died. The recruit was silent, unsure of how to respond. He had witnessed Lena endure ridicule, slaps, and the brutal Hell Week drills with an unwavering calm. But now he understood the source of her fire. It wasn't vanity or pride or ego. It was love, loss, and a vow forged in the crucible of grief. Lena's resolve wasn't just about proving herself to the men around her. It was about proving to the world, and to herself, that loss did not equal surrender, and that courage was a choice, even in the darkest moments. As the day progressed, Lena moved with renewed purpose. Every drill became a ritual of remembrance, every push through exhaustion a silent tribute. She noticed the subtle shifts around her. Kane, who had once mocked her openly, now kept a careful distance, watching her movements with a mixture of awe and humility. The other recruits, too, had begun to mirror her discipline, unconsciously absorbing the example she set. Lena's reason, though unspoken most of the time, had begun to shape the energy of the entire camp. During the midday log carry, Lena noticed a recruit faltering under the weight of the massive timber. Without hesitation, She moved beside him, adjusting the load and encouraging him quietly. Keep your core tight. Move with the rhythm of the log, not against it, she instructed calmly. The man glanced at her, a flicker of disbelief crossing his face. He had expected anger, yelling, perhaps sarcasm. Instead, he found guidance and strength. Lena's resolve wasn't just personal. It had become contagious, inspiring those around her to reach beyond what they believed was possible. That evening, after another punishing session in the surf, Lena sat on the edge of the beach, legs buried in sand, staring at the horizon. The sun dipped low, painting the waves gold and crimson, reflecting the tumult of emotions inside her. She thought of her brother, of the life he had lived, and the sacrifice he had made. She whispered a quiet vow, barely audible over the roar of the ocean. I will finish what you started. I will honor you in every step, every breath, every victory. The ocean seemed to echo her resolve, relentless and eternal. By the time night fell, the other recruits had begun to understand Lena's true power. It wasn't her strength, her skill, or even her endurance that made her formidable. It was her purpose, her unwavering commitment to a promise larger than herself. Kane approached her quietly, eyes lowered, respect finally replacing arrogance. I get it now, he said softly. You're not here to prove anything to us. You're here for him. Lena simply nodded, her face unreadable, but inside she felt a quiet satisfaction. Recognition wasn't necessary. Understanding was enough. The instructors, too, took note. They had seen hundreds of recruits come and go, but Lena Marshall was different. She carried more than physical endurance or tactical skill. She carried a reason, a fire, a purpose that no drill, no insult, no slap could extinguish. Her presence had shifted the dynamics of the camp. Where doubt had once existed, now there was respect. Where fear had once flared, now there was determination. Lena was no longer just a recruit. She was a force, a symbol, and a leader in silence. That night, as Lena lay on her cot, muscles trembling from fatigue and bruises, she reflected on the journey so far. Hell Week had tested her body and mind beyond normal limits. The slap, the humiliation, the exhaustion, all had become part of her story, each one shaping her, strengthening her, sharpening her resolve. Her brother's words echoed again, steady and unwavering. Don't let fear own you. Lena knew that fear would never own her. Doubt would never define her. And loss would never dictate her limits. Outside, the Pacific waves crashed endlessly, a rhythmic reminder of endurance and persistence. Lena closed her eyes and envisioned her brother's face, the determination in his eyes, the promise they had shared. She smiled faintly. Her journey was far from over. There would be more trials, more tests, more moments designed to push her beyond every conceivable limit. But she was ready. Every step forward, every drill endured, every ounce of pain absorbed, was a testament to purpose, honor, and relentless determination. The camp around her slept fitfully, bodies broken, spirits strained, yet Lena lay quietly, unwavering. She didn't boast. She didn't seek praise. She simply carried her reason, her brother's memory, her vow, her unshakable determination, as both shield and sword. And in that moment, she knew the truth. Her strength was not in her arms, her legs, or her endurance. Her strength was in her reason, in the fire behind her eyes, in the promise she had made and would never break. The sky was a steely gray as Lena Marshall stepped onto the training ground, every step measured, every breath controlled. Hell Week had pushed her and the other recruits to their absolute limits. Bodies were exhausted, minds frayed, yet the final test awaited. A grueling, simulated combat mission designed to challenge everything they had learned: endurance, skill, strategy, and leadership. For most, This was the ultimate proving ground. For Lena, it was the moment to demonstrate that the trials had not broken her. They had forged her. The instructors gave the mission brief with military precision. Navigate through a simulated hostile environment. Complete the objective under time constraints. Extract all team members safely and demonstrate tactical acumen. The recruits listened, fatigue evident in their postures. But Lena's eyes were sharp, focused, scanning the scenario with a clarity few could muster at this stage. Kane, her erstwhile rival, glanced at her, a mixture of respect and apprehension in his expression. He knew instinctively that following her lead would be the difference between success and failure. The simulation began immediately. Thick fog blanketed the course, obscuring vision and heightening tension. Lena led the team, her movements precise, her commands concise. Every obstacle was met with strategy rather than brute force. Traps were navigated, simulated enemy positions avoided, and every step accounted for. While others hesitated, Lena anticipated challenges, adapting to conditions that would have overwhelmed less disciplined recruits. Her calm presence became the anchor that steadied the group amidst chaos. Midway through the course, the team encountered a particularly difficult challenge. A mock minefield designed to test concentration under extreme stress. Each step had to be deliberate. A single misstep could simulate catastrophic failure. Lena took point, her eyes scanning the terrain, sensing the invisible threats before they became real in simulation. Kane followed close behind, relying on her judgment, while the other recruits trailed, some visibly shaken. Lena's voice was steady as she directed each member. Slow, one step at a time. Keep your focus. Don't rush. The team followed, moving with increasing confidence, their fear slowly replaced by trust in her command. The simulation intensified as a sudden enemy ambush was introduced. Pyrotechnics and simulated gunfire erupted around them, and the team had to take cover and respond with tactical maneuvers. Recruits panicked, some frozen with fear. Lena, however, remained composed. She coordinated the team with efficiency, issuing orders that combined defense, offensive tactics, and extraction strategy. Kane, now fully aware of her capability, followed without question, executing maneuvers he would have previously scoffed at. The team moved as a unit, not because of fear, but because of Lena's steady leadership. At one point, a teammate fell behind, exhausted and struggling to carry the simulated casualty. Lena didn't hesitate. She dropped her own load to assist, guiding him through the dangerous terrain while maintaining awareness of the broader mission. Her actions inspired the others, showing that leadership was not about authority, but about shared responsibility, courage, and decisiveness. Even the instructors, observing from the perimeter, exchanged nods of approval. Lena was not just surviving the test. She was mastering it, elevating those around her in the process. Hours into the exercise, the team faced the final obstacle, a high wall followed by a simulated extraction under fire. Energy was nearly depleted, muscles trembling, yet Lena's focus was unbroken. She coordinated the team's climb, calculated the timing, and ensured everyone moved efficiently while maintaining cover. When Kane hesitated, exhausted and panicked, Lena extended a hand, pulling him up with calm authority. Trust yourself. Trust me. Move now, she said firmly. Her guidance was precise. Kane followed, and the team successfully scaled the wall and completed the extraction sequence. When the simulation ended, silence fell. The instructors gathered the recruits, assessing their performance. Lena stood quietly, sweat and mud streaked across her face, bruises on her arms and legs, yet she radiated calm authority. Kane approached her, finally speaking with unguarded respect. I get it now. You're incredible, he said quietly. Lena nodded, not needing to respond. The acknowledgement was unnecessary. The results spoke for themselves. Every recruit, every instructor, had witnessed her mastery of skill, endurance, strategy, and leadership. The debrief revealed the full extent of their performance. Lena's team had completed the mission flawlessly, demonstrating efficiency, cohesion, and tactical intelligence under extreme stress. Instructors praised her decision-making, situational awareness, and ability to maintain control under conditions designed to break the strongest candidates. For Lena, the recognition was secondary. Her satisfaction came from knowing she had honored her brother's memory, kept her promise, and proven to herself and others that she could endure anything. That evening, as the recruits gathered for the final evaluation, Lena stood quietly at the edge of the group. The camp was littered with evidence of Hell Week: fatigue, bruises, mud-streaked uniforms, and exhausted faces. Yet amidst the destruction and exhaustion, there was a quiet admiration directed toward her. She had transformed from the recruit who had been slapped and mocked into a symbol of perseverance, discipline, and quiet strength. Kane, once her most vocal detractor, now walked beside her, silent but clearly changed. The instructors called Lena forward. "Marshall," the lead instructor said, voice firm, "you have demonstrated exceptional skill, leadership, and resilience. You have not only survived the challenges, but elevated those around you. Your performance sets a standard for every recruit who follows." Lena stood at attention, calm and composed. No smile, no boast, just silent acknowledgement of the recognition she had earned through relentless effort, discipline, and unwavering focus. Later, alone on the beach, Lena reflected on her journey. Every slap, insult, and doubt had been a test, and she had passed them all. Every grueling drill, sleepless night, and agonizing obstacle had been endured, and she had emerged stronger, sharper, and more focused. Her body was battered, her muscles ached, but her mind was clear. She had transformed adversity into triumph, pain into purpose, and ridicule into respect. She had not just survived the SEAL training. She had mastered it. As the stars emerged over the darkened sky, Lena walked along the shoreline, the waves crashing relentlessly at her feet. She thought of her brother, the SEAL who had inspired her, and whispered a quiet promise. "I have honored you. I have endured. I will continue. I am unstoppable." The ocean seemed to echo her vow, relentless and eternal. Lena knew that life would always bring challenges, but nothing could shake the foundation she had built: skill, discipline, purpose, and the fire behind her eyes. Hell Week was over, but Lena's story was far from finished. She had faced ridicule, violence, exhaustion, and doubt, and emerged not only unbroken, but a force that commanded respect, inspired others, and embodied the promise she had made long ago. Every recruit who had doubted her, every man who had mocked her, and every obstacle that had tested her endurance had taught her a singular truth: strength without purpose is empty. Courage without discipline is fleeting, and true mastery comes from controlling both body and mind. The camp was quiet now, the chaos of the week replaced by a calm anticipation of what was next. Lena Marshall, bruised but unyielding, walked into the night with her head held high. She had earned her place, proven her worth, and solidified her reputation. The final test had been endured, the lesson delivered, and the respect of her peers secured. Lena was no longer just a recruit. She was a symbol of unshakable resolve, a living testament to endurance, skill, and the power of a reason that burns brighter than fear. The sun rose slowly over the training compound, casting golden light across the sand-streaked uniforms and exhausted faces of the recruits. Hell Week was over. The air, heavy with sweat, salt, and the residue of relentless exertion, was now punctuated by a rare moment of calm. Lena Marshall stood silently on the beach, surveying the group. Her body ached from every drill, every obstacle, every punishing exercise, but her spirit burned brighter than ever. She had endured, she had led, and she had triumphed. The instructors began the final ceremony. Recruits gathered, posture straight, faces weary but proud. Lena, as always, stood at the edge of the group, quiet but commanding. She had never sought recognition, yet now it was unavoidable. Her performance had been unmatched, precise, fearless, and disciplined to a degree rarely seen. Cain, once her fiercest critic, now stood beside her, silent but respectful. He had witnessed her strength, her courage, and her unshakable resolve. For the first time, he truly understood her, and it had changed him. The lead instructor called Lena forward. "Marshall," he said, voice resonating over the still compound, "you have not only completed Hell Week, but you have redefined what it means to endure and lead. Your discipline, skill, and resolve are exceptional. You have earned the respect of every recruit here, and you have demonstrated that strength comes from purpose, precision, and perseverance. You are an example for all who follow." Lena stepped forward, her body trembling from exhaustion, yet her posture remained impeccable. She saluted, a gesture of both respect and acknowledgement. The applause from her peers was not loud or boastful. It was quiet, sincere, and earned. No one cheered louder than Cain, who nodded at her with a mixture of humility and admiration. Lena didn't smile. There was no need. Her triumph was silent, but no less powerful. Every bruise, every blister, every sleepless night had led to this moment, a moment that solidified her legacy. As the recruits dispersed, Lena remained on the beach, staring at the endless horizon where ocean met sky. She thought of her brother, the SEAL who had inspired her, whose life and sacrifice had become the driving force behind every step, every drill, and every triumph. She whispered his name into the wind, a quiet homage to his memory. "I did it. I honored you. I endured. I am your legacy." The waves crashed at her feet, rhythmic and relentless, echoing the heartbeat that had carried her through every trial. Later, in the barracks, Lena reflected on her journey. She remembered the first days, the laughter, the mockery, the slap that had seemed like an insurmountable insult. She remembered the relentless drills, the exhaustion, and the moments when quitting seemed easier than continuing. Yet every challenge had shaped her. Every doubt, every insult, every bruise had been a test, and she had passed them all. Lena realized that true triumph was not measured by accolades or recognition alone. It was measured by the transformation of the self, the resilience of the spirit, and the unwavering commitment to a purpose greater than oneself. The other recruits, too, had been transformed by her presence. Cain approached her quietly, hesitating before speaking. I underestimated you," he admitted, his voice low and sincere. "Not just your skill, but your focus, your leadership. I see now. You're unstoppable." Lena nodded, a gesture of acknowledgement rather than pride. She had never sought to dominate through arrogance. Her victory had always been silent, earned through action rather than words. And yet, seeing the respect in their eyes, she understood that her journey had inspired others to push beyond their limits. Outside, the camp was quiet, the sun setting in brilliant streaks of orange and red. Lena walked along the shoreline, each step deliberate, absorbing the calm after the storm. She reflected on the journey that had begun with mockery and doubt, progressed through grueling physical and mental trials, and culminated in recognition, respect, and personal triumph. The lessons she had learned were etched into her body and spirit. Control was more powerful than brute force, purpose stronger than fear, and resilience more enduring than pride. That night, Lena sat alone on the sand, staring at the stars reflected in the darkened waters. She thought of the recruits who had doubted her, the men who had challenged her, and the instructors who had observed her rise. She realized that the impact she had made went beyond herself. She had redefined what was possible, not just for women in the SEALs, but for every recruit who had followed her, learned from her, or been inspired by her journey. Lena Marshall had become a symbol, a living testament to perseverance, courage, and relentless dedication. She allowed herself a rare moment of quiet satisfaction. Not pride, not arrogance, but the calm certainty that she had fulfilled the promise she had made long ago to honor her brother, to endure beyond limits, and to emerge stronger than anyone could have imagined. The slap, the humiliation, the doubt, all of it had become part of a story that now defined her. Every scar, every bruise, every ache in her body was a reminder that true strength was forged in adversity, and that resilience was the ultimate victory. As the night deepened, Lena whispered another vow, one for the future, one for herself. I will continue to push forward. I will lead. I will endure. And no matter what comes next, I will face it with the same fire, focus, and unyielding resolve that has carried me here. The waves crashed in answer, relentless and eternal, a perfect mirror of her own spirit. In the days that followed, Lena's journey became legend among the recruits and instructors. Her story, from the slap on the first day to the relentless mastery of Hell Week and the final test, was retold as an example of courage, skill, and unbreakable resolve. New recruits listened in awe, inspired by her endurance and leadership. Kane, now her steadfast ally, often recalled the lessons he had learned from her: discipline, control, and purpose above all. Lena's legacy had been cemented not in words or accolades, but in the respect, transformation, and inspiration she had left behind. Finally, standing on the beach one last time before leaving the training grounds, Lena Marshall took a deep breath, feeling the salt air fill her lungs. She looked out at the endless horizon, reflecting on the journey, the hardships, and the triumphs. She had proven her strength, earned her respect, and honored her brother's memory. But more than that, she had discovered the true measure of victory: resilience, purpose, and the courage to face every challenge head-on. Lena turned, walking away from the sand and surf with steady steps, leaving behind a story of triumph, inspiration, and an enduring legacy that would echo through the SEAL community for years to come. The world had tested Lena Marshall, mocked her, doubted her, and tried to break her. And yet she had endured. She had transformed adversity into mastery, pain into purpose, and challenges into triumph. She had risen above every obstacle, every insult, and every doubt. In the end, Lena Marshall was not just a Navy SEAL. She was a symbol of courage, discipline, and unyielding determination, a force that no one could ignore, a legacy that would not be forgotten, and a story that would inspire every recruit who dared to follow in her footsteps.